Former Baltimore Ravens running back Ray Rice, he's banned from the NFL, at least for the indefinite future, after, as we know, he's caught on camera hitting his wife in that elevator in Atlantic City. Rice is now appealing that decision. The NFL is fighting off claims that it knew about what happened in the elevator months before Rice was released by the Ravens and indefinitely suspended by the league. And while Rice is out of the game, you got other situations. Hope Solo, she's the goalie of the women's national soccer team. She's still playing, even though she's pled not guilty to domestic violence charges that were filed against her by her half-sister and her nephew. Officials say they will allow her to keep playing while her case is pending. You look at a bunch of other cases, though, NFL players, they're not on the field even though they haven't been convicted in certain cases. So the rules are all over the place. But let's leave the world of sports for a second. Let's look at professions, for example, like the law. U.S. District Court Judge Mark Fuller, you see right here, Alabama judge, he remains on the bench despite facing battery charges against his wife, who's accused of assaulting at an Atlanta hotel. There are calls for him to resign. Now, I'll go in a second to other examples, but let's start with something you guys know all too well. You're bringing a case before a judge, and the judge is facing charges of his own that he was involved in domestic violence. Now, hasn't been convicted of anything. I don't even know if he's even been indicted, okay? But he's been charged. So my question is, what's the threshold? What's the expectation for people in authority? In this case, the judge, the person who puts on the robe, you should think is the person that's got the greatest, at least belief of the people in the room to be above everything else. Should he or she be able to stay behind the bench if they're accused?
No, and the reason for that, and it's a very specific area of the law, is it's what the people, the citizens' perception, what are the people in a galley going to be thinking? Are they going to think that this judge is going to be impartial? Are they going to think that this judge is going to be biased because of his particular situation? It goes for the government, it also goes for the defense. The government may feel that since he may feel he's being wrongfully accused, that might create bias. But the people in the audience, what are they going to feel? How is their belief and confidence in the system going to be affected? So
okay, Doug,
I
for me,
so.
That's kind of easy. I don't think too many people disagree. Let me make it harder. Let's say it's an attorney, okay? The attorney is not making the final rulings. He or she is pleading the case of their client one way or the other. Should an attorney, if also accused, be able to present before a jury in a court?
I think he should. I believe the judge should be allowed to stay on the bench. I think the judge
even domestic violence cases?
Absolutely.
If he's accused of assault?
I'm a strong believer in due process. The judge and the attorney has
okay,
a
but
right.
time out. All right, I got you. But why can't a rational person say his decision will be colored one way or the other? If he feels he's being improperly maligned, let's say, he's going to give a break here to the defendant who's accused. You could also argue he wants to go out of his way to show that he's not sympathetic to someone facing similar charges. He's going to be even harder on the defendant than he would another. He's bringing baggage, Doug, to something, even if he's not convicted. Why doesn't the defendant have the benefit of the doubt to get somebody who's not involved in this at all?
Well, listen, if the judge is going to actually change his rulings because of what he's charged, we have a problem. That judge probably shouldn't be on the bench. But if you're talking about
there's
somebody
discretionary stuff you know better than me that he could rule either way on, and that's just a call.
Listen, if you have a solid judge, and I hope we're putting solid judges on the bench, they will never let that come into play. They'll make the calls, balls and strikes like they should.
But they're humans, right?
Humans, but you know, we're talking about due process here. We're talking about somebody being able to know what they're charged with, confronting their accusers, and getting a ruling at the end of the day. I think the judge probably should, just because he could be perceived as being biased one way, then he should take himself away.
I'll try it a different way, which is, I had this conversation in a morning meeting. We all got kids. One of our kids has a teacher who's accused of having improper relations with a student. There is no way, and you know where, that person's going to be at the front of that class come Monday if the charges came on Friday. I don't care if they've been, if they've had their day in court or whatever. That environment wouldn't be allowed to continue. I can tell you from the broadcast world, there was an anchor, very well known in New York, that was removed immediately from the air after he was involved in a domestic violence situation, even if not formally convicted by the courts. Certain people that are put in the front, whether it be trust for a judge or the public trust of media or whatever else, aren't allowed. But should we feel the same way? Let's say somebody in the sanitation business, okay? I guess he's a representation of the sanitation company, but he's not there teaching our kids or making rulings in cases. Should we have the same rules for everybody, even if they haven't been convicted?
Well, I think that you have to be able to take into account the different special relationships. So if you're looking at a teacher, for instance, if you're looking at a doctor, someone who may be dealing with you when you're under, anesthesia, if you're looking at police officers who may be dealing with you literally on the street, and there are others that I'm not thinking of at the moment, but those maybe you should say, I still believe, and I agree with Doug, that you have to afford people the presumption of innocence, and due process is the key. Once we lose that, it's no longer the United States of America.
You do get me, though, that it's a gray area. Certain people could look at certain jobs saying that's a public figure, and certain other people say it's absolutely not.
What I would say there, though, with the teachers, I would put that teacher in an administrative position where they're not dealing with children. I would take that doctor or that nurse where they're no longer dealing with patients. You can do other things.
And a judge as well can be put administratively.
Well, with the judge, though, I would say this. For the judge, the bigger issue is whether you have parties appearing that make contributions to your campaign. So, for instance, you may have, if two of us are before the judge, and let's say, Doug's given a contribution, I haven't. That's a bigger issue, because then it would make people think, well, gee, the judge is going to favor Doug. That's more important to me than.
They always favor Doug.
They generally do.
Yes. All right. Well, speaking of Doug, he's going to love this next one. We come back. You probably have seen this on YouTube. People holding up cameras telling officers they don't have a right to ask for their ID. Well, when do you and don't you have to? We're going to take a look at just that very issue right after this.